Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to do some inky techniques to help you make the most of your 3D embossing folders. Hope you enjoy! So the first technique I'm going to show you is with distress inks. So I'm starting with a piece of paper that is 6 1/4 by 4 1/4, and this is a perfect size to fit inside of a 3D embossing folder. And I'm putting on some distress ink in Candied Apple, just in some random places. And I'm going to work in rainbow order here. So my next color will be Carved Pumpkin. And I'm going to put this around the Candied Apple. Now I have sped through the ink blending on this, just so that the video wasn't too long. After this, I'm going to add some mustard seed. And then instead of green or blue, I'm going to add in peacock feathers, which is a nice greeny blue. And this goes really well with the mustard seed. And lastly, I'm going to add in some wilted violet. And I'm just going to put this everywhere where there's white showing on my card. And like I said, this is all random, so it doesn't matter where the circles end up in the end. Now to apply the distress inks today, I used my finger daubers. They're nice and small, so that helps me get into tight little areas like this. And because I use them often, I have one for each of the color families. I keep all the finger daubers on my desk in a lipstick holder that I got at a pound store, like a dollar store. So it's very handy and easy for me to grab when I'm crafting. I also like to use my finger daubers for stenciling, so I like to keep them handy. So I'm just going to continue blending until I'm happy with it. And then while my panel is still wet with the ink, I'm going to place it in my folder. And you can see this one on the right is just beautiful. This is called Kaleidoscope from Tim Holtz. And I'm going to use some Chipped Sapphire Distress Oxide. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a very light pressure just on the top there. And I'm going to go from left to right over really nice and light. I'm not pushing too hard. And I'm just putting it on the right here, and then I'll hold it up so that you can see the difference it makes. It's a very subtle difference, but it brings out the pattern even more. I'm sure you can see that. So I'm going to continue on the rest of the panel. Using that chipped sapphire just makes the world of difference on this and helps to make the design pop and draws attention to it. Now, once you're happy with that, you can move on to the next step. I decided that I needed a bit more color around the outside, so I wanted to use some black soot. I didn't have it in a distress oxide, so I just used my distress ink. I think either would work for this. And I went very lightly around the outside to make a black soot frame. So for this first technique, I would recommend using a lighter color of distress ink on the card panel before you emboss it, and then a darker color of either distress oxide or distress ink lightly brushed on top after you've embossed it. And then you can add a color around the outside if you like. Beautiful. So now I'm moving on to my second technique. So I'm just going to put some water on my 3D embossing folder and put in a piece of black card. Now the card will be a little bit wet, so I'm going to heat it with my heat tool until it's dry. And then I'm going to use my ink on top. And this is the Enchanted Gold by Altenew. And I'm using the ink very lightly. You can see what it does here. And I'm going to continue using the ink lightly, except for the edges where I'm going to apply the ink quite heavily. And again, I get this beautiful border around my inked panel. You could always apply the ink more heavily throughout if you prefer. So here are the two finished panels, and I'm going to set them aside until they're completely dry. Meanwhile, I'm going to create my sentiments. So I'm using this Altenew set called Crafty Life, and these cards are going to some fellow crafters, so I know they will appreciate them. I'm going to start with some heat embossing on a piece of black paper, and I'm going to use my VersaFine clear sticky ink. This sentiment reads, "Crafters gotta craft." And there's a pencil and a paintbrush, which just finishes it off. Now, once I've stamped that, I'm going to apply some white embossing powder, and then I will heat that with my heat tool. And lately I've been using my Ranger heat tool instead of my embossing gun for heating with the heat embossing. And I've noticed that I have less issues and I seem to get a clear image. So it's something to try if you struggle with heat embossing. So for the second card, I'm going to do the same thing but use a piece of white paper and black embossing powder. And I have my two sentiments here. I couldn't quite decide which one should go on which, but I settled with this in the end. And then I'm going to use my PVA white glue, and I'm going to adhere these sentiments. And then I just put something heavy on them until the glue had set. Now I'm going to put each of these cards onto a 5 by 7 inch card panel with some more liquid glue. This is the card size that I prefer to use, and the size of these embossing folders gives you a nice frame on a 5 by 7 inch card. And I used a white piece of paper for the black embossed paper and black for the rainbow one. And then I'm going to put these onto 5 by 7 inch card blanks. Now for the inside of both cards, I put the sentiment the same, and I used the sentiment from the same stamp set. There's lots of fun craft-related sentiments to choose from, so it was hard for me to pick just one, so I picked two. The first sentiment at the top says, "A day of crafting is just what the doctor ordered." And then there's these fun rectangles that say, "Eat, sleep, craft, repeat." And I just loved these and thought they were perfect for these crafty cards. And for a finishing touch on the outside of the card, I decided it needed a little bit of sparkle. So I used these fun jewels in rainbow colors, and I just put them randomly over the front of the card. I ended up putting about 8 of these, but you could put as many or as few as you like. On the other card, I just picked out the yellow jewels as it matched the gold on the ink, and I added a few of them scattered around the card. I also adhered these with the PVA glue off screen. So here are the finished cards with that beautiful sentiment inside. I hope you learned something today and found this video inspiring. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!